Hello and welcome to the latest in manufacturing management series of Ask the Expert videos. Today I'm joined by Alastair Morris, Chief Commercial Officer of Powerstar, a leading smart energy solutions provider. Now, energy resilience is more important than ever before, with manufacturers under pressure to become more sustainable and cut their energy consumption in the face of rising prices and global political wranglings. And Alastair's here today to talk about why resilience in particular is business critical and how manufacturers can use companies like Powerstar to become more resilient. But first of all, Alastair, I noticed that you're joining us from your factory floor. Can you tell us a bit about Powerstar? You manufacture here in the UK, if I'm right.
Yeah, sure. So two facilities in the UK, one here in Sheffield, which is our headquarters, and one down in Bromsgrove. A range of hardware and software that we offer, ranging from transformers. We wind our own transformers in the UK, fairly unusually. Core of the business for the past 15 years has been voltage optimization technology. So a piece of electronics that reduces electrical consumption on site. And then what you see behind me now, which is really the backbone and the growth of the business now, are battery storage systems. But really the capability of the business is as much around the power management, so the control systems and the software that manages power on site, as much as it is in a battery system in a shipping container.
Sure, and I kind of touched on it a second ago, but why exactly is power resilience more important for manufacturers now than it probably ever has been, and how can manufacturers work towards becoming more resilient with their power supply?
Yeah, so for me, resilience boils down to a couple of issues. One is to do with the quality of the power supply, and the other is to do with the reliability of it. And the reason that's important to manufacturers now more than ever, and probably increasingly so in the future, is largely to do with automation and electrification of everything. So if I really spell this out, I'm not just talking about power cuts and blackouts, which is kind of what people immediately think of when I talk about power resilience. So I'm talking about variations in voltage or frequency of supply. You have things called brownouts, which are a drop in the supply voltage from the grid. Now, traditionally, it's the sort of thing that would have made the lights flicker. They might have dimmed slightly. You'd have noticed it, and you've got, oh, the lights have just flickered, but thought nothing more of it and carried on with what you were doing. If you have any kind of robotics, a production line that runs on PLCs, you have more and more electrified equipment, you have connected systems on your production facility, you're running things off critical servers, then they suffer much more from these kind of disruptions, these variations in the power that's supplied. Production lines can shut down with really short-term power disruptions, the sort of disruption that you might be getting 8, 12 of in a year, that shuts down production maybe for half an hour, has a significant loss of output, and there's a measurable cost associated with those power disruptions that never used to be an issue in manufacturing. A sector like data centers has been really acutely aware of this and had really uninterruptible power supplies fitted to their technology. An important customer base for us is also hospitals, where these power disruptions are really a matter of life and death. But manufacturing now increasingly, as it automates and electrifies, is more reliant on a very consistent, high quality power supply. The other key bit about power resilience is to do with the volatility of the energy market. And that can be in terms of pricing or the capacity that's available. And that's going to continue to be a huge business risk for manufacturing companies for years to come. It's not just something that's happening this winter with price spikes. As the national grid turns to renewable energy, as we change the way that we generate our electricity, that's going to be a constant picture as we go through an energy transition. The security of a constant, cheap electricity supply will disappear. So manufacturers really need to think about how they mitigate that, because that's a real effect on their bottom line and their margin. So what can they do to insulate themselves from whatever's happening at a macro and national or even international level that might be affecting their energy.
Absolutely. You mentioned automation and robotics and more reliance, I suppose, on electricity and the grid and power in general, kind of coming into play now within manufacturing and some of the challenges around the future. How can manufacturers still look to innovate and look to be at the cutting edge while also keeping an eye on resilience? You mentioned some things just then, but what kind of practical steps can manufacturers do as they become more and more reliant, I suppose, on a good high quality power supply?
Yeah, so I think the key is really to take control of the situation. So yeah, you can rely on the national grid. You can hope that it's going to be okay, but really, if you're going to take control and mitigate those risks, bring this on site and manage it yourself, and that's the kind of solution that we help with. So whereas electricity always used to just be a cable coming in the wall, it was available, there was as much as you needed, you just paid for it at the end of the month. Future scenario, I think, really has a much more complex electrical infrastructure on site, what I might refer to as a microgrid, whereby you'll have your own generation. So you might have solar panels on your roof, as we have here. You might have a wind turbine. You might have some other source of power generation on site. You have a storage system, something like the thing behind me, where you can store energy for use at critical times. And you buy electricity from the grid at optimum times. So when it's cheapest, when it's greenest, when it's reliable. But you've insulated yourself from some of these macro effects by really taking control of things on your own site. And so this is really kind of where Powerstar focuses its efforts on managing those power flows on site and optimizing them for whatever the site's aims are, whether those are to be have net zero carbon emissions, okay, then we'll make sure that the electricity is always as green as possible from the available facilities.
Yeah, sure. And again, you touched on it a little bit there, but how do Powerstar help manufacturers become more resilient? You obviously got the big boxes behind you, but how do you provide a kind of advisory service on how to form potentially these microgrids that you were just discussing?
Yeah, exactly. So the hardware is the shipping container full of batteries, but really the technical expertise is in that power management. So what we will do on all of these sorts of projects is to really look at the overall power system on site, whether that's got renewables, whether it's got some kind of combined heat and power, what the critical loads are, the critical things for the site that need protecting, whether it's operating 24/7 or whether it's on a single shift, taking all these factors into consideration and design the optimized power flows. We've then got the capability here to simulate these, so to build a virtual model of the site, of the power flows, before we ever start fitting out a shipping container with electronics, and really run that through real-time tests. So stress test it for whatever the most extreme case is. So when your largest piece of equipment is switched on and there's a fluctuation in power from the grid, whatever that real extreme case is, we can ensure that the system is fully spec'd to cope with that scenario before we ever actually fully design and start building the system. And that's really where our expertise comes into it, knowing how to manage those power flows, knowing what other systems might need to be brought into it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's very interesting, being able to virtually test everything out before you, as you say, before you commit to doing anything physically. What are some of the kind of key challenges that the companies you're working with are facing? What are the key solutions that you're having to come up with? Is there something that keeps, a problem that keeps repeating itself that other manufacturers out there might be experiencing themselves?
Sure. So the really common thing, it's the fact that energy has this what I call a trilemma. No, it's not just a dilemma, but a trilemma at the moment. That that we're all worried about the costs. They're escalating. So we need an affordable power supply. We're also trying to have this secure, reliable supply that I was talking about. So I'll worry about electrifying everything. And we also need to make sure that it's sustainable. So huge pressures on the manufacturing sector to decarbonize. And that's actually a lot of the point of entry for a lot of manufacturing companies to us. So they come to us and say, you know, our customer base is asking us to for us to provide our product with the minimum carbon emissions possible. I have to decarbonize my facility, but I can't put at risk those other things. I can't put at risk the security or the cost of my power supply because I'll be uncompetitive. How do I balance these three things? And so we really come to these net zero projects, if you like, with the ability to provide that security as well. So the kind of the unique thing about our battery storage systems is their ability to provide UPS, uninterruptible power supply to the site, to cancel out all of those power disruptions, while also supporting a net zero project with renewable energy, with an electrified fleet of vehicles that are all charging at once. So really trying to manage that trilemma with one single solution.
Absolutely, and yeah, that's really fascinating insight. But unfortunately, that is all we've got time for now. But if you want to find out more about Powerstar or anything that Alastair and I have discussed today in today's session, contact details will be on screen shortly, and I'm sure Alastair will be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. But for now, thank you to Alastair and again to Powerstar for sponsoring today's Ask the Expert interview, and I hope to see you all again very soon.